We are now live. So, Cabinet is about to commence. I have apologies from David Basmer and his Deputy Portfolio Holder, Tom Dainty, will be here to give his report and answer questions. So thank you for that. We also have Dan Thomas, the leader of the Conservative group, unable to attend, and so his deputy, Ed Bird, is here in his place. So thank you very much for all of that. Do I have any more apologies? Don't think we do.
No.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor James Owen.
Just declaring interest that I'm a member of Ulster Street Town Council for the item.
Thank you. David.
Same for me, please.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Let's then move on. Can we move to the minutes of the last meeting of Cabinet held on 15th of October and adopt those as a correct record, please? Proposer Alex Wagner, seconder. Somebody will second. Thank you, David Walker. We now move on to public question time, please. And we have Jane Gallagher with a question about Shire Hall and carbon emissions.
I'm representing Save Our Shire Hall campaigners. So naturally, the very difficult financial position that the new Lib Dem administration has inherited means that Shropshire Council Cabinet will be considering the future of all its assets. It's therefore understood that the future of the iconic, internationally acclaimed Shire Hall buildings are under consideration. While we can imagine that opportunities for financial partnership with the Council may be on offer to retain and adapt the Shire Hall, Save Our Shire Hall campaigners ask whether, having declared a climate emergency in 2019 and set out a strategy and action plan in December 2020, how would any proposal to demolish the Shire Hall and redevelop the site fulfil the Council's published strategy and its intentions, published climate strategy and action plan, which states its intentions to become net zero by 2030, including a specific action to sequester carbon? What environmental assessments have been undertaken to demonstrate that such demolition would not contribute to an increase in the Council's carbon emissions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to, the answer was requested from the Chief Exec and Sam Williams to a PA, Tia Clark, and our portfolio holder will actually reply to you. Roger Evans.
Thank you, Leader. My reply, thank you, Jane, for your question. This is a hard question to answer. There are some unknowns to which answers are still required. The Shire Hall has had very little money spent on it in recent times. Some say it is no longer fit for the purpose it was built for. Parts get cold, other parts get hot. Even rooms next door to each other vary in temperature. Ask any employee what their working conditions were like, and the vast majority will agree with the statement I've just made. It also cost a lot of money to heat and ventilate it. It used a lot of energy to heat and ventilate it. I grew up in the 1960s. The house I lived in then had no heating, and during the winter, there was often ice on the inside of the glass windows. Living conditions have much improved. Working conditions have much improved. Expectation of working conditions have much improved. To bring the Shire Hall up to the level workers have a right to expect will cost a lot of money, will need a lot of work, and consequently, a lot of carbon will be generated in carrying out this work. Also, do we have the money to do this? Sadly, no. Can we bring it up to the expected, wanted net zero condition? I very much doubt it. Until very recently, even though workers were told in October 24, 12 months ago, that the Shire Hall was closing and they would need to work from home until alterations had been carried out in it, some staff were still working in there. It was a council decision, so only another council decision can alter it. And that decision, of course, was to demolish it and sell the site. What we have done is paused this decision and asked experts to look at it again, look at the whole site, do a reappraisal. The results are just now being received. We would like to retain the council chamber and some of the associated buildings, but we do need to take account of the cost, both in cash terms and in net zero terms. The site is much too big for our present requirements. What I and we have done is paused the decision and asked for an up-to-date appraisal with alternatives. I and we plan, hopefully, to bring those results to a public meeting in the near future. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Leader.
Normally, I wouldn't allow, well, we haven't allowed supplementaries. If there's anything you would like to ask that we can follow up with, and then I will allow you to do that. Because, and this will be coming probably back to Cabinet or at least Council in December. Council, yeah.
I would only add that Save Our Shire Hall campaigners have been active for about 5 years and have demonstrated that the problems that you've highlighted in terms of the environmental functioning of the building can be addressed, and part of the issues with it have been to do with the incorrect monitoring and management of the heating and ventilation systems. And I know from the architect's son who designed it that that was all integrated into the original concept. I think we've also demonstrated that with environmental improvements, so like double glazing, that the cost of that could be would not be significant because part of it's already been done on, I think, the top floor of the building. So there are opportunities to improve the functioning of the building and make it fit for purpose in terms of staff working in it. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to reply?
Yeah, and thank you. And yes, it is 2022 when that decision was first made by a previous council. And unfortunately for me and us around this table, it was a council decision. So we will have to go back to a council, and I would hope it's sooner rather than later, to make a decision on the Shire Hall, because I want to keep it as much as we can afford, both environmentally and cash-wise. Whether we can or not will depend, because as you allude in your question, the council is strapped for cash and we need to get returns, and if we're not careful, there will be commissioners appointed to come in. So we need to really look at it deeply, and we will be. And as I also said in my answer, we want to do that in conjunction with the public and residents of Shropshire, and trying to work together to try and keep what you and many others say is an iconic building in full or in part of the 1960s. So rather than flatten the site, as I say, we've paused it, we're going to look at it, and we will be seeking views, hopefully, but depends on when we do. And hope, again, we're here for 4 years, and I hope it will not be like it is now in 4 years' time.
It will be coming to the December council. So, because we do have to make decisions about it, because it's still costing us money. Okay. So thank you very much. So we now have a question from Keith Trubshaw about the Sports Village development, and Tim Collard will read the question.
Thank you, Leader. The question is in two parts, so I'll read the first part and then ask Councillor Owen to respond. So the first part of the question is this: did the council and the development team explore the options offered by new technology that would enable full engagement of all stakeholders by creating a digital twin of the project? One whereby problems could be identified and solved or eliminated before a spade goes into the ground, substantially reducing or potentially eliminating the possibility of cost overruns which plague public projects of this kind?
Thank you. So the answer to this question will be responded to by Councillor James Owen, who's the portfolio holder for leisure.
Thank you. The project team has advised that it's unclear what is meant by digital twin. However, the Sports Village project was subjected to a full public consultation in March to May 2024. We have selected a design and build team led by Pelican Construction Limited, who are one of the leading pool and leisure centre developers in the UK and Europe. Their building methodology involved computer modelling of all aspects of design and construction. The detailed designs are being completed alongside detailed surveys, which can only be completed through on-site investigations to ensure a complete understanding of the site conditions and build risks are understood. The project has assigned a contingency, so if approved, there will be funds available in the event that unforeseen conditions are exposed.
And the second part of the question?
Second part is this. Will it be a matter of public record that when costs overrun, the council declined to explore ways in which those overruns could have been avoided?
The recent experience of the Council of Whitchurch is that our design and construction team delivered this £14 million project ahead of schedule and under budget. We're not expecting the project to exceed estimated budget, but if overrun was to occur, this would be reported to Cabinet and Council and be made public.
And I might add to all of this that actually, if anybody is really interested in the scrutiny around all of this, there should be a link and a recording to the scrutiny for people to watch this section, where much of this was actually investigated. Thank you. Okay, so the next question is from John Palmer about the North West Relief Road and the spend to date. And that will be read by Tim Collard.
Thank you. His question is this. In brackets, he puts MB, Cabinet report only just published Friday the 14th of November, so under the rules I'm still within deadline. In the Financial Monitoring Report Quarter 2, 2025-26, published online only on Friday the 14th, ahead of this meeting, the updated Table 2 between paragraphs 4.4 and 4.5 of the report and paragraph 4.5 itself outline the budgetary implications of the, for now, paused Shrewsbury North West Relief Roads project spent to date of £38,895,000. Both the central and adverse forecast scenarios have enormous budgetary implications, and the request for exceptional financial support from the government potentially needs to embrace either forecast scenario. After 16 years of Tory quagmire, secret machinations, ideological environmental desolation and performative traitorism, Shropshire residents are left with this mess. So will Cabinet today update everyone on why there is silence in recent months about resolving the Shrewsbury North West Relief Road spend issue with the government?
Thank you, and I'll ask Councillor Roger Evans to answer that as the finance portfolio holder.
Thank you, Leader. I notice John's concern and also his thoughts, including, to quote from the questions, the secret machinations of the previous administration. This one, which I am a member of, has given a commitment of openness and transparency. This I totally support, as do all members of this around this table. The cost to build the North West Relief Road, estimated nearly 12 months ago, was of course £215 million. And as you intimate, this estimated cost is more than our council can afford. No further update on costing has been sought. And yes, I can confirm all work on the road is paused. What the cost to build it now is not known, but it will be in excess of the figure just quoted. Discussions concerning this road, which also involve our MPs, all the MPs, have and are taking place with the Department of Transport. No solution has yet been arrived at, but government officials have confirmed that at no time has or was any commitment made by any officer of the government, past or present, that they would pay the full cost of this road's construction. Furthermore, we are in discussion with the Department for Transport to consider an alternative scheme that would enable the council to retain existing government funding to partly cover write-off costs for the current scheme. These discussions continue, and I assure you that we will inform residents as soon as a resolution has been agreed. The council is also in discussions with the MHCLG to ensure that they are also fully aware of the associated write-off costs for the North West Relief Road should the scheme formally be cancelled by council. Part of the North West Relief Road, of course, incorporates what was formerly called the Oxon Link Road. This subject appears on the council's forward plan at present. Repeated efforts are being made with the Department of Transport to resolve the issue, and I can assure everyone that the council will publish the latest position as soon as we can be sure of what that answer is. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, in which case we now move on to member question time. And we have a question from Craig Emery, who can't be with us. So Duncan Kerr will read it, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm reading this on behalf of Craig Emery, who can't be here for reasons that will become apparent soon. So he writes, this week marks a road safety week across the United Kingdom, where people up and down the country call for safer roads for everyone. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend Cabinet in person today, as I'm supporting students from Durham College in their campaign for safer streets. Students regularly wait 20 minutes to cross the 40-mile-an-hour road outside their college to catch a bus to Oswestry. Elsewhere in Gabowen, the school streets trial has been a particular success. However, it is a trial only, and information about this continuing has been limited from officers, and that applies to other schemes as well. My hope would be for Shropshire Council to go further and faster by introducing a default 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in residential areas. This would reduce the complexity of school streets and ultimately save Shropshire Council money. The default speed limit of 20 miles per hour on built-up roads in Wales has brought multiple benefits. Lower speeds in Wales have led to 630, that's 26%, fewer casualties in the 12 months after the national speed limit changed compared to the previous year, including 80 fewer fatal or serious injuries. Lower than expected vehicle damage claims has enabled eShore Insurance Group to reduce its premiums for Welsh drivers, and eShore is now committed to reducing policy prices for customers within 3 months of identifying a new 20-mile-per-hour area in the rest of the UK. Can Cabinet members update the community on their plans to bring safer streets to Shropshire as a priority, especially outside schools, SEND colleges and built-up residential areas?
Thank you. I know that much of this is close to Councillor Rob Wilson's heart, and he will now be responding.
I thank Councillor Emery for his question and applaud him for highlighting the issues faced by students at Durham College. Councillor Emery has eloquently presented the evidence for greater use of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and that is exactly what we are working on with officers. We have met with counterparts in Oxfordshire, where the Liberal Democrats and Green administration successfully rolled out a 20-mile-an-hour transformation programme, where local parish and town councils could request reviewed speed limits with the support of their local county councillor. As I have answered previously, this work is complicated by the 20-mile-an-hour outside schools programme introduced by the previous Conservative administration. We will work with officers to provide a robust mechanism for delivery, aligning our manifesto pledge with the emerging local transport plan and local plan. This will ensure schemes are fit for purpose. Regarding school streets, I share Councillor Emery's frustration with the suspension, especially in the case of Gabowen. Last week, I asked officers to provide an update for the affected local members. This is in train and a clearer position will be available shortly.
Thank you very much. Okay, in which... Oh, sorry, yes, of course.
You say no. I think Craig would be reassured by your response, and I take the positivity, and obviously you can learn a lot from Oxfordshire. I think what we're looking for is a date, though, to be perfectly honest, because I know you've been in administration now for 6 months. You must be starting to form a view as to when this new policy could come in, and it would be helpful, I think, for everybody to say that's the sort of date we're targeting towards. So can I ask you for a date, a target date?
I can't commit to a target date. I wish I could. I think this comes back to what we're seeing across the council. A lack of capacity in the officer corps makes bringing forward new policy incredibly challenging right now. But we are working at it as we speak.
And it, as Duncan, you will know, sitting on the improvement board, actually the squeeze around spend is significant, and this would actually cost money, and it costs a capacity we just don't have at the moment. So it's not something that we don't want to bring forward. We do, and I'm particularly agitated, as I know that Councillor Ruth Houghton is, that even the 20-mile-an-hour limits outside schools are rapidly brought about, and that has stalled. And I know that Rob's been doing work on that to make sure at least that comes forward, because we have schools with 60 miles an hour outside them, which is totally unacceptable. We have schools where there are other accidents, and we need to do that. But actually having the funding in place to do these things is significant. And I think this is just a fact of life. And we did not come into administration to sit here and say, sorry, you can't afford it, because we would really like to afford them. But it's all part of our joint responsibility to make sure we remain sustainable for the future. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but I think, unfortunately, that's where we are. And we are committed, but we can only be committed when we're financially sustainable. So you can smile all you like, Duncan, but that's the situation we're in. Right, okay. Thank you very much. We now move on to the financial monitoring report. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Ed. This is probably one of those really interesting items on the agenda that we really need to look at. So if you could give your verbal report, and I know we're expecting the written report for the next cabinet in December.
Brilliant. Many members of Cabinet were present at the Economy and Environment Overview Scrutiny Committee meeting last week, where, following a request from local member and deputy leader of the council, our committee looked at the levelling up project around the gyratory station in Shrewsbury. This was following public concern, including a live petition with more than 6,000 signatures to date. And at that meeting, we heard from portfolio holders, we heard from officers around the background to this scheme and some of the problems which it had faced over the past couple of years. As a result of that, a decision has been made to take a deeper dive into this. Because it's important that we hear from a variety of witnesses, which we were unable to do at the last meeting. So this will include members of Shrewsbury Town Council, the BID, local businesses, the Blue Light Services, WSP, Shropshire Council Highways officers, Shropshire Council Economic Growth officers, and relevant portfolio holders. Our intention is to, and planning is underway to hold this rapid task and finish on Monday of next week, with us to be able to report back to you with some firm recommendations as soon as possible, hopefully for the December cabinet meeting, as long as all the dates align and we can get everything in place. Just to give you a bit of a feel, other than one of our recommendations was to set up this task and finish, we also have some additional recommendations we've established already to present to Cabinet, that, and I'll read these out, that the Economy and Overview Scrutiny Committee recommends that the Service Director for Infrastructure, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Transport and Economic Growth, considers the commissioning of an independent safety audit review of the current proposals to provide assurance that associated risks such as congestion and emergency access are robustly addressed. Second recommendation is that Cabinet be asked to review the Council's strategic partnerships. And a third recommendation that the lessons learned from this process are applied not only to future initiatives, but also to existing schemes currently in operation to assure robust governance and prevent similar issues from arising. This approach will help to strengthen oversight and promote best practice across all ongoing programmes, which I think is really key at the moment. So that's quite a broad ask. And I think that's something that all portfolio holders might be able to take up when looking at schemes that are currently operating across the Shropshire Council portfolio at the minute. I'm happy to take any questions around the process that we've undertaken in looking at this. We are moving quite rapidly, and there is significant pressure on this scrutiny committee because we had a very long meeting with a very long agenda looking at things such as leisure the other day and green waste. So we're trying to move this through as quick as possible to get some feedback back to you and hopefully address some of the concerns. I don't know what the answers are yet. But hopefully they might become apparent by the time we finished on Monday afternoon.
I hope you don't know the answers now, because otherwise there's no point in scrutiny. So excellent, thank you very much. Questions, Rob?
I just say thank Councillor Potter and his committee for considering us so quickly, acting, and looking at this in detail. I think that's really important. It's clearly a matter of huge public interest, and I think this is an example of scrutiny working at its best. Which I think is something which I know the leader is very keen that this administration supports the scrutiny, has the ability to do these things. I welcome all the recommendations. Just to update Cabinet and members and the public, officers are already working on a commission for an independent safety review that started as soon as your meeting finished last week. I welcome the task and finish group. I'll be there on Monday and very happily be as open as possible with that task and finish group. I think just in terms of your other recommendations, I think it's worth trying to get a bit of meat onto those. So I think in terms of looking at those partnerships, we have already held discussions with the Service Director of Commissioning around this. And I think that's going to be a bigger piece of work, which the Chief Executive is very much aware of. And I've failed to write down your third one, Councillor Potter.
It's about the lessons.
Oh, lessons learned. Yeah, I think that's
looking at the ongoing projects.
Yeah, I think that's something for all Cabinet members to take on. I think we might need to look at exactly how we put that down so it doesn't get lost in the weeds as we go forward, because it's really important that the lessons are learned and that these things don't happen again. I really hope you can get us a report by December.
So right.
I will very happily receive that. I am aware that just in terms of the actual live issues, officers are working as quick as they can. There was an item raised on Monday, wasn't it? Whatever day it was, the scrutiny Wednesday.
No, last Thursday.
There was
I've been here
the days blur. But there were some issues raised about bugs in the system, the lights, and I think that's very evident from the queues we've seen over the last probably 2-3 weeks on St Michael's Street. I understand people have been working on that over the weekend and over the last few days, and I think there's some early anecdotal evidence that possibly yesterday afternoon some of that starts to clear, but I don't want to get carried away. We need to monitor it closely and make improvements for residents.
Just to come back on that, I was going to say, with the recommendations we've made, we don't want to tie you in knots as an administration. We want to give you a steer, and hopefully you can take forward that and work on it. We don't want to tie your hands, one arm behind your back or anything, because that's not going to help anyone. So, yeah, we'll happily work with you on that. And if there's any suggestions, we're happy to continue to look at things going forward.
And the most important thing out of this is making sure we have clear lines of accountability, that actually we have models, those bits of advice that you give to us that we can implement so that we know exactly how these things work for the future. And things will always go wrong, but we need to be able to put them right as quickly as possible when they do go wrong.
I think it's also important to mention, particularly members of the public, there might not be a magic bullet that can solve all these problems straight away. And I think there's going to be a bit of expectation management there. But if we can learn from this, I think going forward is probably one of the biggest wins we can have. It may take a little longer to try and sort out some of the more practical problems that we are seeing on the ground. You've already mentioned the light sequencing. And again, I'm sure that will continue. That work will continue behind the scenes.
So I think the other thing that actually even Rob has mentioned, that actually if when we've got one of these that comes up that we need to deal with quickly, your versatility around this has been really good, because the public don't understand if a council doesn't want to review something for a year because of. They actually want us to look at what's going on now and see what we can do about it now, not in 6 months or a year. So thank you very much for taking this up as quickly as you have. Has anybody else got anything else? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Ed. We move on to financial reporting, Q2. And that will be Roger Evans, please.
Thank you, Leader. Q2 contains figures we were not expecting. We're not happy with. Numbers that are going in the wrong direction. And one can see in 2.3 that the overspend has increased. This is partly due to us taking a real detailed view of what is happening within this council, because the figures in previous months and periods were going in the wrong direction, and we wanted to be sure that we knew the situation we were in. 2.4 shows what steps are being taken, and then 2.8 supplies information on discussions which are taking place with the MHCLG and the request for £15 million of EFS funding to remove the need for a Section 114 report to be issued. In 4.5, there is mention of the £15 million, and in total £64 million that we are asking for as part of the EFS. And then 8.3 gives more details of the forecast overspend and where it is given. And as in said, in 8.4, 3 boards have been set up to try to control what is happening. And table 4 shows the savings that this administration has actually made. And I did mention it at the meeting earlier on this week, when one can see that the new savings that were in the budget that was made last February of 18.71, 14.3 million has been made, which is equivalent to 78%. That is a higher percentage than ever made before. What is still there is the 41, or some of the 41 million pounds that was passed over from last year's administration. But however, we have made 16% of those savings, or 6.77, and we are endeavouring to make more. And I congratulate the staff for doing it. And also, we look at the number of staff that are actually employed by Shropshire Council, and looking at it, and in the outturn report, which went to the audit committee in July, one can see that in 23-24, 76 staff had a financial package and encouragement to leave the council at a cost of 3.5 million. In 24-25, the last year, 217 staff received financial packages to leave the council, which cost 12.9 million. 10 received over £200,000 each, more. These are what legally required, but it shows the number of staff who are still left. And part of the passover of the funding from last year involved £17 million in reductions in right sizing, as it is called. And staff are telling me, and I think other members around the table, we just can't operate now with the numbers of staff that are there. So one of the functions of the boards is to actually look at the staffing situation and to make alterations as is deemed necessary. The £15 million EFS would, under present projections, give the council a potential balance of 2.211 million at next March. And with winter still coming, that is what we need as a buffer, because By next March, we must return a balanced budget. Thank you, Leader. I'll try and answer any questions.
So, do we have questions, please? Ed. Could you put your microphone on, please?
Hello.
No.
Okay. Sorry, technical issues. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Evans, for that statement. So our Conservative group does acknowledge the sheer scale of the financial pressures and the primary drivers of this crisis: soaring social care costs and the systemic underfunding of rural councils are national structural issues that have compounded over a decade. It's a crisis faced by almost every rural county in the nation, and it is a crisis that our group, when in administration, repeatedly and loudly lobbied central government to fix, and that commitment stands. However, the report is not just a general reflection on national finances, it is a clear reflection on the governance of this council in the last 5 months. The most damning indictment in this report is not the headline figure, but the speed and scale of the deterioration after the new Liberal Democrat administration took control. The breakdown, the financial situation has worsened dramatically on the new administration's watch. Period 5 reports up to August forecast a significant overspend of £35.531 million. Yet, just 1 month later, the Q2 report up to September reveals that this forecast has ballooned up to £47.069 million. So the question is, the Conservative administration left challenges, but also left a budget framework that aimed to be balanced. Does the leader and portfolio holder actually believe they acted quick enough when they took office in May to address the inherited savings gaps, and whether the September emergency declaration came too late to prevent further deterioration in Q2? Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Roger?
Thank you, Leader. No doubt.
Can I just add, for anybody listening who doesn't understand what MHCLG is, it's the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and it's that department of the council we've been talking to. So we've been using the acronym, but actually not explained it. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I always keep on forgetting what the acronym stands for, but it is a complicated one. Thank you for your question. A little bit surprised by it, because the budget was set in February by the previous Conservative administration, and it is being operated really with that. We're taking action and amending it, improving it where we possibly can. But yet 47.069 million is a big rise from period 5. But what we are trying to do is be as open and as possible, and we're calling on staff to do a report just 4 or 5 weeks after the end of the previous month, which has never been used before, never been done before, and some of it is not possible to actually be definitive, and we were concerned at the way the reports were going earlier in the year, and hence I think in the report it says a detailed review was taken out at the Q2 period 6, and it was said this was always going to be carried out, and this is what was done, and that is why the figure from 35 to 47 arose, because as it says, some of in the report at 2.3 or 2.4, it says there that the delivery plans were not in place. How can you set a budget and not have delivery plans in place? And as I say, there was £17 million passed to this council, this administration, of right sizing with nothing in place at all. 217 staff left the council under a package, and there are more staff leaving to take other jobs. And if you look at the vacancies in it, it's still there. We have not got sufficient staff to do what is being required. Many residents around the table are not getting answers to the questions or getting information that they want, because our staff are overloaded and trying to do things where before there was more staff doing it. And how can you make staff redundant and put a budget in place with no delivery plans? £41 million was passed over to this council to make this year. £60 million in total. How can you save £60 million in total? It's impossible to my mind, and that's why we finished up going to government for the EFS for the 15. And if you look at the last administration, they took £29 million in EFS to balance their budget, plus other items that were in the cupboards. There is nothing in the cupboard for this year. There is no savings, no balances that we can take at all. So we're living from hand to mouth, which is why we are where we are. Thank you, Leader.
And just to add to that, I'm quite disappointed that it's suggested that we didn't take action, because of course we brought in the Local Government Association in July, which was really rapid because we only actually took control on the 22nd of May. And the seriousness of the situation became very clear from feedback from those people who attended that feedback, and that was all group leaders. There were a number of recommendations, and one of those recommendations was that we would do a deep dive into the finances, which was called looking at the actuals rather than projected figures. We looked at the actuals, and that is why we know exactly where we were. Many of the projections under the last council were actually inaccurate. They weren't going where they should be going. Furthermore, most of the previous budgets were propped up by using the general fund balance. Unfortunately, the amount in the general fund balance now is depleted. We have nothing extra to put into it. So this is why we are where we are. And until we come out of this period, which is the Conservative administration's budget, we are hamstrung. So I'm not going to take any lessons from anybody else about where we are, because none of us came into politics to actually be in the position we're in. So we're making the best of it. We've done exactly what we need to do to try and get us back on track. But it's not going to be comfortable, and we won't be able to do many of the political things we would like to do. That is the situation we're in. So I have...
If I can, Chairman, I'll add to that. As part of the answer to a previous question earlier on about the Shire Hall, I looked at when that decision was made, and I looked at the budget back in 2022. And the budget there said it was £50 million that was needed to be saved in the 23 budget, and it was going to be very hard. And they also said that they were using earmarked reserves to balance their budget, and they were using the financial reserves to balance their budget. So even then, there was money being taken from reserves to balance budgets then. There isn't any for us to do now, and that is why we're in this difficulty.
And that was borne out actually by looking back in the peer challenge, but looking back at previous peer challenges and the SIPRA report on the council, who even in the last one was suggesting that we were very close to a 114, that actually we were in a really difficult position, and it had deteriorated further by the time we got to July. So I now have Dawn Hoosman, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Chair. It's become apparent that quite a significant part of the issue is unrealised and, in fact, unrealistic savings projections being carried forward. We need to have a better understanding of budgeting methodologies and assumptions within this, and I did bring this up at the T&I committee last week. we need to have the ability to challenge the assumptions, the methodologies that are being used, because it's critical that budgets and savings projections are realistic and can be relied upon in the future. And I know that everyone is incredibly busy at the moment, but I do hope that this work will be brought forward in the work programme as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. And it is part of all of the work, and you are on the improvement board with us too, so thank you. Duncan.
Yes, it's a very sombre reading, isn't it? To actually seek funding from the government in order to get to a position where we've got £2 million in reserves on the 31st of March is a desperately dire situation to be in. We are hurtling towards the precipice rather than going slowly towards it. £2 million is probably less than some parish councils have in their reserves. And Tanya knows only too well it's probably one family going into care. A large family could blow the entire reserves of the council. We cannot run a council of this size on £2 million. And so whatever else happens, that level of reserves, or thinking that that level of reserves will be sufficient, is woefully misplaced in my view. The actual report does say, speaking to paragraph 10.3, it says, put another way, the easier to achieve savings have all been taken, reinforcing the need for longer term structural transformation to deliver the majority of the brought forward savings. And I think that's very, very true. All the easy, low-hanging fruit, call it what you like, savings have been made. Some of them have gone too far, I probably agree with you. But, you know, where money was needed to be saved, it has been saved. I mean, it's clearly good to take advice from peer challenges, peer reviews, LGAs, improvement boards, brilliant. But at the end of the day, advice isn't going to balance the books. Only actions are going to balance the books. And if I do go back a year to, you know, when we used to meet, Heather will remember this, we used to meet monthly in our budget review. We did notice that the then administration did bring forward some changes, which we noticed were changes in policy. We didn't necessarily agree with them, but they did deliver significant savings. One was a very rapid decant out of Shire Hall into here, and one was the introduction of green waste charges. They were policy issues that went through the decision-making process in order to save money. And my question is, now that, you know, the new administration's been in for 6 months, where are the similar schemes? Where are the new savings that they require policy to come from the new administration to help balance the books? Now, you're doing, as the portfolio holder said, reasonably well on the old savings identified, you know, by the previous administration implementation, but the situation's so dire that we're going to have to find new savings. And they won't be popular. I'm not trying to pretend they'll be popular, but they are needed.
We'll take. Okay, Roger. Can you? There's a bigger question in here which we'll probably come to at the end. But Roger, if you want to take that quickly, and then I've got a number of other people on the list. So I've got, in fact, I've got Alex, and then Ruth, and then Rosemary online. So, okay, Alex, if you.
I think I can speak to both the point made by Councillor Bird and Councillor Kerr. I just wanted to pick up, because it hasn't been mentioned, that the phrase used earlier around the deficit ballooning. Under the Conservatives, we literally did not know how much money this council was spending. That is not an increased sum because of some unforeseen circumstance. That is savings targets written in a Conservative budget, which there was never any plan to deliver, and which this authority, unless we had intervened and unless we had insisted on a much more stringent budget review process and much more stringent look at actual figures, we would have discovered that on March the 31st and gone bankrupt there and then. If those plans had been left as they were laid out, if the election had been different, if the same people who were in cabinet before were in cabinet now, we wouldn't know that we were that far adrift right now. And I think that's a really fundamental point we have to make. Is actually, in terms of changing the model and changing the way of doing budgeting, that is frankly bordering on maladministration. You know, I mean, it's negligent. And I think that that's been repeated by the fact that we haven't had full audit assurance for 6 years, which is an appalling situation for a council of our size to be in. But the public understandably aren't interested in who did what. They are interested in what we're going to do, which I think is what Duncan is speaking to. For me, and I think looking at the kind of council's overall strategy, a lot of that comes down to the, you know, if you're in a hole, stop digging. Actually, we are now at the point where we don't have staff in place who are capable of bringing in a large amount of revenue or making savings. You know, I mean, some of the reports that we were transformation and improvement scrutiny last week or earlier this week about parish work, the big frustration is actually we could make far more savings far more quickly if we had officers able to do that. I think there's many such examples in the way we manage our contracts in highways, in the way that we deal with housing issues, planning. You know, actually, we are now at the point where we deliver such a basic service that actually when we have opportunities to increase our revenue or save money, we're not able to take them in the same way. So part of asking for emergency financial support is, as you say, really a dire situation to be in, but it does also present an opportunity because it means that we can spend some of this year investing to save money. You know, investing in services which are preventative in care, investing in services in planning and highways which actually ensure that we don't have to spend more money on insurance claims or get more pre-applications into planning, which raises revenue and actually start to repair some of those gaps in the council, because those are real savings. And the savings that we were presented with when we came in, they're not real savings. There was never a plan to deliver them. They were just written on a bit of paper. If we hadn't taken the decision to look at them a lot more closely, we would not have known they weren't going to be delivered. And that is, I think, is pretty important.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Ruth.
Thank you, Leader. I'm really quite disappointed, actually, to hear Councillor Bird's comments, because I feel very strongly it's undermining and reflecting poorly on staff who have worked exceptionally hard to deliver significant savings. So, for example, last year's savings, over 50%, were delivered by social care staff. They are still working extremely hard to deliver further savings at pace, as well as doing a very difficult day job, which doesn't stop. This week, we have a deep dive supported by the Local Government Association with independent reviewers doing a deep dive into children's social care services. There's a further one to follow with adult social care services, and the outcomes of those will inform further savings that can be made or not, and how we set our budgets for next year, Councillor Huseman. So there's a lot of very detailed, significant work going on, and we should not underestimate just how hard our staff are working every single day.
Thank you. Rosemary, online.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Yeah, a couple of things really that I'd just like to add briefly. We're all running out of words to describe just how grim this is, but it's looking absolutely desperate, as I think Duncan said. That I'll stick with that word. A couple of things really to say about it. I think I'd like to ask Councillor Evans how confident he feels going forward to period 7. I asked him this a month ago. He was robustly confident, and it didn't go so well in the outcome for the first 2 quarters. So my understanding is that really what you're saying is that the deep dive that you've done into the accounts reveals the real position, and that is what we're looking at this stage. Whereas before we were looking at a position that wasn't really quite truthful, and which is in itself that asks an awful lot of questions as to how we can be in that position as a council with public money. But really, I'd like assurance that that is what you feel is the case, that we are now looking at real figures, the real cost of going forward to the end of March. That's my understanding of it, but if Roger could perhaps confirm that would be great.
Roger.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Rosemary. Yeah, I would prefer to use the word grim it is looking at, and as I understand it, is that we are looking at real figures now. That was the purpose of doing that in-depth discussion and look at. There may still be 1 or 2 gremlins, but with the 3 boards that are in place, I would expect that we can start to reverse that overspend to start to reduce it. It is a real position. We do it, but can I remind everybody around the table, especially those who were councillors for the last few years, and in defence of our officers, the officers who wrote the report did so at the instigation of the politicians that were in power at that time, and the word that appeared for a number of years was that this is unsustainable. I picked it out when I was a councillor on the other side of the table, and it appeared consistently unsustainable. And it was the administration at that time that drove that budget through and kept a lot of other people did not know what was behind the figures. We're trying to do differently and doing it in the open, and we're discussing it with the opposition leaders so that we are all working together. We can't afford politics. We are working together to deliver people's what they want, what they need. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And I think nobody has mentioned at this point, and I think, Rosemary, we all need to take this on board, that although we're now using actual figures regularly, we still can't have a definitive around winter pressures, because the winter pressures no longer have budget set aside for them. That was removed a while ago by the last administration, so that when we have severe weather, and I must say we were all a bit surprised by the snow this morning, especially across the south of the county, that we have gritting. If we have a severe winter, gritting, flooding, all of those things will cost us money. And certainly the flooding we had last week is costing us in clearing up the mud and the debris left behind. Certainly in my division that's the case, and it will be in a number of others. So all of those things are costs on top that we have to budget for, and we will not know the outcome of that. In the last 2 years it's been quite good, but also a severe winter or a flu outbreak will add extra social care costs in falls, in breaks, in people being taken into care and so on. So there are a whole load of imponderables there. If the weather smiles kindly on us, then that won't do too much to our budgets. If it doesn't, and we have a severe winter and we have a severe flu outbreak, which is already peaking earlier than usual, then we will have extra costs. And we have no reserve to deal with that. So this is the situation we're in. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add to this? Right, okay. In which case we can move to the recommendations, which are A, B, C, D and E. Do I have a proposer for these? Thank you, Roger, and a seconder in Alex. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. We now move on to performance monitoring report Q2. This is a report that comes via the Leader of Council, and we are in the process of changing this so that it's actually meaningful. It would come to the council in the past with a number of figures in it. But what we really need this to do now is for us to understand exactly what it's meaning for us as a council in exceptions, that you have through it easy access to the dashboard and you can see what is going up and what is going down, and where we need to be concentrating our efforts, and it will help inform some of the actions of the improvement board and so on. So I am hoping that you have all read this, and I know that my portfolio holders have looked at various areas here, and I'm pretty sure that Dawn will have something to raise that I raised when I read this. She raised it in scrutiny and you've forgotten. Around these performance figures. So it is meant to be now a working document and an informative document that we can actually use to inform our work. Anything anyone wants to add then? Ed?
So
apologies.
Thank you, Tom.
performance report, thank you, Chair. The performance report tells two different stories, and we need to be clear-eyed about that, both of these. First, the positive. So 74% of our KPIs are meeting their targets, and our early years provision is second in the country. Our teams continue to work incredibly hard under extraordinary pressure. However, some deeply concerning trends have emerged in Q2, trends that speak directly to the health of this organisation. So staff sickness absence has jumped from 9.2 days to 10.4 days per full-time employee. And if this continues, we're heading for over 11 days lost per person this year, exceeding both regional and national averages. Last year, we matched these benchmarks. This year, we're forecast to exceed them. Staff turnover has spiked dramatically from 5.1% in Q1 to 7.8% in Q2. Nearly a third cite career change as their reason. So it's not that it's retirement or relocation, it's people choosing to leave the organisation. And households in bed and breakfast accommodation have risen from 69 in March up to 140 above target. These are not abstract numbers. These are signals about workforce morale, organisational stress, and whether people believe in the direction of travel. Now, to be balanced, some problems are long-standing. For example, we've previously discussed in other meetings about EHCP timeliness has been below target since December 24, and that's a structural challenge that we acknowledge, particularly following the pandemic. But when you combine this performance report with a financial monitoring report, a pattern does emerge. So Q1, 35.5 million overspend, Q2, 47 million overspend. And today staff are leaving at accelerated rates, sickness absence climbing. This is what organisational uncertainty looks like. This is what happens when emergency measures are declared, but staff don't see a clear path forward. We are not saying that every problem began in May. We inherited significant financial pressures, and social care demand is a national crisis. And we fought those battles with government when in administration, and we'll continue to fight them now. But leadership matters. In times of crisis, people have to believe there's a plan. When staff turnover spikes and sickness absence climbs, that tells you something about the belief or lack of it. So the question is, what is being done to stabilise this workforce? Because 74% of KPIs being green won't matter if we don't have the people left over to deliver those services. And the financial emergency was declared in September. We're now in November, staff are leaving, staff are going sick, and the report itself warns that performance may be impacted by emergency measures. Thank you.
So I will be delighted to answer that, because we're doing lots and lots of things around this, not least because actually this is not this quarter, it was the first quarter, and reporting back on that, so it's what we inherited. But during that time, as I've already mentioned, we had a corporate peer challenge which identified in some detail that our staff were, their morale was rock bottom, that actually in many areas they were understaffed. We've then moved on to looking at a pulse survey so that we had lots of feedback from staff so that we could begin to change this. You cannot change things immediately unless you know exactly what it is you need to change. So we've done all of that work, and part of the improvement board work and in an action from our peer challenge is to put in place a people plan, which begins to look at how we make sure that people are happier working for the council, that it is a good place for them to work and that they feel safe working here. So that whole people plan is worth you looking at, and it will be published at the next cabinet so that you can see exactly what we're doing. Part of the stresses for them, of course, is that many departments have got lots of very vital work to be doing, but they're understaffed now. So that's why exceptional financial support is absolutely vital, that we can invest in those departments so we get money in and we save money, but we don't have people coming to work with a workload that is so massive they can't face it. So all of those things are beginning to be put in place. Tanya on a Thursday runs It's a senior leadership forum. I always get the letters wrong, where she has staff in here. The very first one Alex went to, and I'm sure Alex would be able to tell you how good that was, because people could come and give their ideas, feel safe about it, feel that actually whatever they said were really good ideas that could be taken forward. We're very much in a listening mode, so that frontline staff often know where you can make savings, but they need to feel safe to put those things in place. So it was all of that. Frequently, it's managers in a room being talked to about where we need to go, how we may need to manage our staff so they feel better, that it's much, much more inclusive across the board, because this council cannot do what it's got to do without a staff that feel included and supported and so on. They will go the extra mile if that's the case. And many of them have been going the extra mile for many years and are exhausted. So these figures are not great, but we're hoping that what we're putting in place, and it is a live document, the people plan, will begin to reduce all of that, and people will feel much more valued and listened to for the future. I don't know whether you need to add anything, Alex.
Only briefly, just I think the Senior Leadership Forum has been a really positive innovation. So it's about 40 or 45 staff, I think, get an invite. So all the senior managers, I think we've done 5 of them now, something like that. But part of the positive of that is actually one of the things the LGA highlighted was that there is some feeling in some bits of council that there are sort of 2 or more councils, the care and people side, and then the rest, essentially. Actually, mutual understanding of each other is really hard, because if you work in, say, highways, it's entirely possible you wouldn't necessarily interact with a senior care manager ever, and that even though you're both in the senior management team, both meant to be pushing to a similar corporate plan and all the rest of it. So as much as anything, just having that space where people can understand what each part of council's working on and realise that we're pushing in the same direction, I think has just been a brilliant innovation. I think it'd be fair to say there were people in that room on day one who had never spoken to each other before. Despite being senior managers for Shropshire Council, that's no longer a barrier. I just think in terms of making people want to get up and get out of bed and go to work for a good authority, it's been quite a big change, that really.
And just to add to that, the cafe is now a space where people can come in and work together. They can actually have a cup of coffee together. And the first morning, I think both Tanya and I witnessed people meeting people they hadn't seen since before COVID. You cannot have teams training, working effectively, if they never come in and see one another. So on top of people just being able to meet one another in the cafe and so on, and having a central point, Tanya is keen to get teams in at least 2 or 3 days a week so that they are together, because you don't exchange information. If you've got a simple question, you're not going to dial somebody on Teams to find out the answer, because then you spend a bit of time. It's one of those things that just makes us more cohesive, and we need to have a cohesive staff. So there's lots going on. Anything else anybody wants to add to any of that? I don't know whether you want to add any of that, Tanya.
You answered it perfectly, Leader. But I would add to that in terms of staff engagement. So yes, we meet with our senior leaders on a Thursday morning, but also staff engagement is really important. And I think what staff are saying, that we are more visible, both as leaders, but also as cabinet. The leader and I held an informal staff webinar last month, I think it was. We've got a further one in December, and we've committed to one in February. It's not scripted, it's an informal catch up with the leader and the chief exec, and the feedback from staff was it felt very open and transparent. And also within our weekly comms that we're sending out to, there's positive feedback on that from our staff. But it's going to take a while to ensure that our whole organisation is feeling supported, feeling valued and feeling empowered. But certainly the people's plan that we're bringing to Cabinet and into Council in December will start to describe that story that we're on.
Nothing you want to ask about that then, Ed?
Well, just like to say it's actually positive. I struggled a lot through COVID. I was working through COVID, and it was such a relief to get back into work and see people. I think it is vitally important that you can answer those simple queries, just walking the floor and talking to people in the building. And I do understand and sympathise with the, as stated, the difficult situation, whilst on one hand having to save money, and at the other hand also need to still implement the services and keep staff motivated. So I like what I'm hearing, and I really hope that it bears fruit and that the situation improves. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. I just wanted to focus on one particular exception, which is the reduction of households in B&B accommodation, which I think is a big issue for councils across the country. Just to say that I do monitor this, so it's gone down from 100 to 83 in the current week, so it's already gone down 20 towards our target of 60, and there is more units coming online this month. So we have one unit that's just opened with 50 spaces in, so we're looking forward to reducing that number further.
And that is an important monetary saving. Duncan?
Yeah, I was going to focus on some other areas actually. So it's HP3 and HEN6, nice name. So HP3 is, as a former environmental health officer, you'd forgive me for asking about this, is food hygiene inspections. And whilst it seems that there's a profiling issue which seems to have resulted in the apparent failure to inspect the number of properties we are due to inspect, it does actually say in the text that we are three full-time equivalents below the resource level required to complete the inspections that we are mandated to do by the Food Standards Agency. And we don't really want the Food Standards Agency to start sending in their intervention teams and start to lean on us as well. So I'd be interested to hear what are we doing to address the capacity within environmental health to ensure that we can undertake those food inspections. And then the other one is the recycling rate. So the good news would appear to be that the recycling rate in Q2 has gone up to 52%. It was 43% in Q1. But I have to say that traditionally this council used a 53, 54% recycling rate. If you go back far enough, we were a top 10 recycling rate. If we're only just going up to 52% in the summer months when we've got most green waste, we are going to be a long way from where we need to be as a local authority on recycling. Now, those of us who were on the last council know that I pushed the previous administration ridiculously hard to get a waste minimisation strategy written. I don't honestly think it was a very thorough strategy or a very challenging strategy, but it has been written. So my question is, what is being done to look again at waste minimisation strategy, to look at bolder methodologies for actually improving our recycling rate by bearing down on the amount of waste which is taken, residual waste for incineration, and are we actually at the same time looking to explore savings as a result of that, as other councils have been able to achieve?
Thank you, Duncan. I'll go to Bernie first, and unless Tom is up to speed with waste, I'll do the waste bit. Are you up to speed with it? We'll come to you after Bernie.
Yes. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Duncan. As you identify, the public protection teams are substantially below requirements to deliver a fully effective service, though any issues which are brought to the attention of the various regulatory bodies are dealt with. With regard to routine follow-ups, there in the strategy for staffing for 26-27, there will include the requirements for additional staff to be able to meet those needs. But for the present time, it's primarily a reactive force of officers and professionals.
And has been for some time, actually. I remember doing
yes, for many years. This has been the case.
Are you up to the waste question?
Of the aspects of this portfolio, of all the aspects of this portfolio, I think waste is the one that I know possibly the least about. So I think it's probably best.
You've been doing highways and flooding, right? That's fine. I've been involved in it. Right. Recycling rates, of course, have gone down because of the green waste charges on bins. And as we know, the administration thought that we would have 70% uptake for the green bin. That was never likely because the average across the country is 55%, and guess what? Our uptake was 56%. So we've got a big gap in the budget, and we've got a big gap in that waste coming through. And many of us, of course, compost most of our green waste, but there's still quite a lot of green waste that I don't want going in my compost heap because it's weeds that I don't want to be spread across my garden because they don't die in my compost heap. So there are a number of issues around that, but as we know, when the green waste charges were brought in, food waste was the heavy part of that, and we stopped being able to collect it, which means that, of course, the recycling rates went down. When we at some point during next year have a plan in place for food waste collection, then they will begin to come up again. And it is around the food waste collection, unfortunately, that this has dropped. We have a good summer quarter here because people were throwing things out of their garden and things were growing like fury because the conditions were right. It is likely to drop lower again during the winter because many people will not be using their green bins. So there are all sorts of issues, and there are contractual issues that we do discuss with Veolia about all of that. So it's part of the picture. It would be really good if we had confirmation from government about how much money they were going to give us to roll out food waste collection. But there are ongoing conversations, as I say, with Veolia to make sure that comes into place. Food waste collection should be in April 26, but as long as we have plans in place, it doesn't have to be implemented in April 26. And that's where we're going at the moment because there are too many unknowns in it. So it's working with Veolia, it's working and waiting for the government. It's a number of things. Reducing the amount of waste going to the recycling centres is an important part of that, and much of that is around waste collection itself and education. We have stopped educating the public around some of that, so it's another conversation. At the present time, of course, the amount of waste going to our depots is much higher because we've got lots of food waste in it. So we've got a decrease and an increase, which makes our recycling figures. So there is work going on about it, but it is complex and it is difficult because there are a number of blockers in the way. Do you have a follow-up, Duncan?
I suppose part of my question was about, are you going to be more radical in waste minimisation than the last administration was?
If you give us some money, you're going to go and...
You can make savings rather than being given money. That's what other authorities have found.
If you come up with the ideas about how we can make savings, we will, and there will be some scrutiny going on around this. So actually, I'm sure you will feed into that, Duncan. And there are savings to be made, but some of those probably can't be discussed in public at the present time. Okay, right, Dawn.
Focusing on a different metric here. When I read this one, I nearly spat my coffee out. Because apparently the claim is that 99.7% of households throughout Shropshire have access to super fast broadband.
You remembered?
Notes. Right. And it was explained that the methodology that's being used to present this might need some looking at. I think it needs a lot of looking at because this is completely unrealistic to what's actually happening on the ground. Now, I'm happy to work with anyone on this. I've even reached out to Mr. Anderson and asked for his assistance. Apparently, he's asked a number of questions. I don't want questions. I want masts. I want connections to houses. You know, a lot of what we're going to be trying to do government and the administration here is dependent upon good, both mobile and fixed broadband connections. I was recently had my MPFT hat on and was at a quality assurance inspection, and the what are they called? Not social worker, the home visitors that have to go out at the out of hours home visitors. They're out at night. Now, if one of those has to go out to one of my people in Badger, and there's a safeguarding concern, and they need to call the office to have a number 2 come out to help them, there is no signal. There is nothing there. It's a complete and utter dead spot. We're talking about the transfer from acute to community. Well, how's that going to work when people haven't got this kind of infrastructure in their areas, in their homes? So it was agreed that they would look at some kind of different way of reporting on this that is slightly more realistic. Because anyone at the top that's actually got some money that might give it to us, they're going to look at that and think, well, everything's fine down there. They don't need anything. And we clearly do. And I've had instances literally on my land, and this will apply to farmers who tend to work on their own, are out there, unsupervised. We know the accident rate in that community is appallingly high, but something happens to them. They're in the middle of a field. There's no signal. I had it on my land. My husband hurt himself quite considerably. I'm running up and down the driveway trying to get a signal to speak to the air ambulance. This is just not good enough. So I'm up for any ideas. I'll work with anybody. I don't care, as long as we can get some better infrastructure in Shropshire, please. Thank you.
So you'll be delighted to know I've been fighting this one for several years. And it's out of our control. At the present time, there is one part of it that actually we have had some control over, which I'll ask Rob to talk about in a minute, which is the Seven Rivers Trust. No, the River Severn Partnership. I can never remember which one's which. So the River Severn Partnership, I'll ask him to talk to you about that in a minute. But this is down to BD UK, and I can't remember what that stands for. Building Digital UK. It is a government body that was set up to roll out broadband, first of all, and then super fast broadband. They used to do stuff through the council. They don't anymore. They let contracts themselves for the various operators to deliver fibre to the premise. They should have been rolling this out across our rural areas, the last 5%, by 2026. Unfortunately, they managed to let these contracts to 2 companies who found that they couldn't do it. So by mutual agreement, those contracts were removed. And one of those was Veneas, who actually deliver huge amounts across my particular division. Sometime last year, their contract went. I have been pressing the officer here who oversees this to find out what they were going to do to replace that. There's one other company that also lost its contract, which I think covers a lot of your area. And it has taken BD UK quite a considerable length of time to re-let those contracts. They have now re-let them to Openreach. And Openreach, I don't think, from what I've been reading, are going to be able to deliver to the same extent as the original contracts. And the target date for this to have happened now has moved to 2030, which is appalling in that many of the rural areas are significantly set back, both economically, but also for delivering care for us. It's a huge range of things that we depend on that have to be delivered digitally in some form or another. Farmers have huge problems just doing much of their online work, their passports for animals, all of those things. So it is a massive problem for rural areas. And instead of us being able to enable our very rural areas, and my division's very rural indeed, we are now in a position where that's been pushed further back by 4 years, and still some properties won't get that. There's the services that existing people are getting through direct wireless can be very intermittent, and there are all sorts of issues around that. I have businesses who've been down for weeks because the company supplying it don't come back. Their customer service is poor. They are not covered by Ofcom. So the government needs to tighten all of that up, because Ofcom really can't look at those contracts and so on, because it's a different service and the legislation hasn't moved. So Rob and I were really concerned by all of this. It must be 3 weeks ago, when it became clear that it's now 2030 and then not everybody. So we have written to all of our MPs to say, will you please do this in Parliament? So we did that, and we released it to the press as well. I don't think anybody, we have one reply. Two reply. But it's something we need to carry on doing, because it's in our interests as a council, it's in our residents' interests, and we are significantly behind the game across the board. Could you just update us on where we are?
The extra bits, I think Heather's covered a lot of it, but I think it is really important that our MPs speak up on this. I think the government, BDUK was a separate agency and has now been brought back into the Department for Science, Industry and Technology, DSIT. And it is up to the government to step up on this for rural communities. I know we say there's a lot, but in particular, digital connectivity is so essential for rural communities, because without it, particularly with the loss of copper and everything else, it's so vital. And on that, Heather's right that we can speak loudly, but the levers we can pull are quite limited. The kind of the flip side of that is the River Severn Partnership Wireless Innovation Region, which does not have a very nice short acronym. It's like it doesn't really roll the tongue. But it is doing some really interesting work. There's some, but that is more looking at pilots of what can be done. So some pilots are looking at neutral host towers where multiple providers go on to. I think there's 2 of those currently operating. There's some work being led by Warwickshire County Council, but across the region, where residents can borrow signal boosters. I think it's for up to 6 months to see if that works to make things better or not. Doesn't, fair enough. I think it works for some people, it doesn't work for others, but at least you can borrow it for free to find out if it does work for you or not. We've had the colloquially termed bin lorry survey, which has actually gone around. It basically had sensors on the front of the bin lorries, and as they drove around, it's created a map of where the not spots are around the county. That's available publicly. I think that separates out into the different network providers. I know Helen Morgan in North Shropshire leads the all-party parliamentary group for something like rural. Sorry,
flooded communities.
No, I'm thinking there's one on rural roaming, and he's pushing for the idea that in rural areas people should be able to roam as you do internationally. So if you have no signal, you go on to an alternative. I think there is an interesting thing. There are some providers starting to look at dual SIM options. I saw one recently. It was on Dragon's Den, where for a dual SIM, you have a backup SIM, which allows you to roam onto any other network when your own one is not available. So there are options out there, but as Heather said, our leaders of the council are limited beyond our megaphone.
Dave.
Just on that point, having got multiple phones with multiple SIMs, I've got access to every network and I can go all over the place and get no signal on any. So it's all sorts of courses. So it's an option, but you still need the backbone to deliver it, as you say. And I've got a nice telegraph pole at the end of my house with all the fibre cables that
fibre put in, and I'll be staring at that until 2030 before it actually gets connected at either end. So it's just ridiculous.
It is, absolutely. Rob will come back and then I'll go back to Dawn.
Sorry, there's one thing I forgot to mention. I met with BDUK and our officer last week. They are putting together a list of FAQs, so for the public, so they can actually understand what has happened with this transfer of the contracts, and there's all sorts of type A, B, C. I said plainly, we need to know, the public need to know what was promised in terms of delivery, in terms of numbers of homes. What does that mean now? What was the timescale and what is the timescale now? So at least people are really aware of what is happening in their area. But they are also organising a members briefing for all members to understand more about what is going on with BDUK and what is being provided and what was promised and now will not be. So that will be available to all members. It's probably in the new year.
Right. Last thing, Dawn.
Yep, just quickly. It was contacting Mr. Anderson. You know, I did sort of put forward the point that he needs to bring, and all of them, they need to bring this up with the government, and particularly with somebody like West Streeting, because he's got all of these amazing plans of pushing everything into the community. Well, it's not going to work. You know, unless this infrastructure is there, it's not going to be possible. So, you know, if they want their plan to work, they've got to look at a joined up approach and make sure that we down here have the infrastructure possible. But I don't know if you can encourage them to sort of take that argument, because they're setting their plans up for failure, basically. So it seems a bit silly to me. Thank you.
At our it's something on the agenda for the next NP briefing. Right. Okay. Let's move on. We're going to be here all day at this rate. So we now move on to the recommendations to note the progress, and collectively we have reviewed the underlying Shropshire's performance with everything else we're doing, the local government framework, the corporate plan, and so on for the future. I'll propose. I have a seconder inbuilt. All those in favour? Thank you. The annual health and safety performance report. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I have very little to add to it. It is a factual performance there, report there. You'll see in the recommendations in 2, it asks us to note the contents of the report, particularly noting those points below it. So I propose that and try and answer any questions. There is an accompanying report with it as well as the actual report. Thank you, Leader.
Does anybody want to ask anything about this? Good. Propose. Second. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. We now move on to the skateboard and BMX pump track provision in Oswestry. Again, Roger. And we did ask for this to come back within a month so that we could move this one on.
Thank you. Make a commitment to share. We did make a commitment to share and work with partners, and welcome with Oswestry Town Council and putting their contribution to it. And we want to proceed. We want to proceed without undue delay. And you'll see in the report that the recommendation is that it goes ahead, and in conjunction with myself, we arrive at where we are after consultation with the Oswestry Town Council, and they look at the sites which we are suggesting could be used. So really, it is what it is. It's working in partnership. We're saying that we're prepared to do any of those sites that are there. Oswestry to pick which one they wish, and then we will progress with as much speed as we possibly can, because Oswestry has agreed to do all the groundwork on it. All we're doing is doing the legal work to make that lease transfer to them. So I propose it, Chairman.
Thank you, Duncan.
Yeah, I'm appreciative of the intent to actually move speedily on this. As you know, it will be widely welcomed by the town of Oswestry. However, I do have some issues with the report, and I've set some of these out with Heather earlier the week, so you've had a chance to consider them. First of all, it would have been courteous in the report to actually say that this has come about as a request from OTC and indeed a petition from members of the public, and indeed the recommendations of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That context is missing from the report. The report does then identify 4 potential sites in Shropshire Council's ownership. It doesn't give us the criteria, and for people in the town, there are 2 very obvious sites which are just missing from that list. One is Wilfred Owen Green, the biggest green site right in the middle of town, and one is Bryn Hafford Field, which is right next to the town council's own park. And I don't know why they weren't there, but we're going to be asked, the town council, why they're not there, and so clarification on site selection would have been very useful, and indeed the criteria. Oswestry's criteria for looking at and asking only for the leisure centre was first of all to divert cycle use away from Lewin Copse and the Hill Fort. Massive damage has been done. A young lady came, Daisy Kirtley, to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and was almost in tears to explain damage down to local flora and bluebells by the carving up of Lewin Copse by kids who just want to ride their bikes, frankly, but doing it in the worst possible place. The need for good levels of natural surveillance to reduce the risk to vulnerable children. We know we've had issues in some areas of the town of that. The need to have services close at hand in case there's an accident or an incident, and that was in particular stressed by Theo Merchant, who organised the petition, said that that was absolutely essential. And then I think from the town council point of view, the need to have the ability in the future maybe to provide lighting or indeed CCTV. Lighting might extend the use of this facility into the winter hours when obviously the daylight hours are reduced. And then finally to be accessible both to the existing population and mindful of 700 new houses currently being built. So on that basis, the Copse is the very worst possible site to put forward, even contemplate. Even putting it out there will get a response of incredulity, because that is the area that's currently being damaged. It is the worst place to attract mountain bike users to. It's right next to the Hill Fort, where English Heritage have written to us to say this is not an area where we want kids to come on mountain bikes. So I'm really surprised, and I do not concur with any suggestion that goes forward. It also seems to suggest the town council will have to do a consultation on these sites. That's a bit problematic, because anybody living near those sites will want to know exactly where this facility is going. It talks about one site, which is actually Henley Woods, which is a massive site. It doesn't say where. People want to know where, which means a design. It means the surveys to see what ground conditions are like and see what underneath survey services are there, which are all a bit expensive to be done on 4 sites. And I don't think the town council, I have no idea, will consider that an effective use of its time or money. There's only one that actually meets the criteria that I've set out, which is the site next to the leisure centre. That was the request coming to the to the Shropshire Council. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say the town council should do consultation on that and should only proceed subject to consultation, but that's much easier to do consultation on one site than it is on 4 sites. Finally, I don't think we do have a protocol on local members, and I believe that this report should have triggered that protocol. I'm looking at Tim Gollard here, but you've identified sites very specifically. They sit within wards. I don't think there's been any attempt to apply the local member protocol to this and to give those local representatives the opportunity to come to this meeting and give you their views. And I just think going forward, we need to make sure that local member protocol is adhered to.
Roger.
Totally disappointed. Do you want this report to be withdrawn? Nobody from Oswestry has been in contact with me. I'm the one who's doing it. I'm the one who's brought it to the cabinet several times. I'm the one who entered scrutiny when it was on. If officers have not paid attention, have not replied to you, then come to me. I am amazed to receive that. I've done that in good faith, in saying to Oswestry, I want to work with you. This council wants to work with you, and to have that broadcast now, and not when this report was published, when you could have come back to me then and said about it, and we could have modified it and altered it. I am amazed. Do you want this report to be withdrawn and start again, or are you content for me to do it? Because it is a partnership. Does Oswestry Town Council, who you are obviously talking on behalf of, and the residents want me to pull this report now and go back to basics and start it again? Please let me know, because that's what I can do. This is a way forward, and there is a timetable there to take it forward. If none of these sites are considered suitable, okay, we will go back to the drawing board, but it will be delayed. And I am trying to work together and being open and transparent. This report has been out. Nobody has contacted me as a cabinet member looking after it. Thank you, Leader.
James Owen.
I think I do have to point out that Councillor Kerr doesn't represent Oswestry Town Council. He is here as a Shropshire councillor. To sort of counter one of Councillor Kerr's points, 2 of the sites that are named are in my ward, and therefore I am present. The other 2 are represented by the other 2 Councillor Owens, both who can't attend. Therefore, it's a matter of one of us is in attendance and the others can't. I also feel that the points you made are points that you could make at Oswestry Town Council when you've been offered this deal to argue for which site to actually accept. Like, this report doesn't tell you that you have to go for anything other than the leisure centre. It's just giving the options because they decided that doing a survey of all the sites would be beneficial to the town council for any potential future projects as well. That's work has already been done. So I feel like this report is perfectly fine to go to the town council as it is for these discussions to happen at that level and not here. We shouldn't be making decisions on Oswestry at cabinet level, especially on something like this.
Thank you. I'm glad that the local member protocol was actually used, because that is significantly bad for us as a council if that hadn't been the case, but since the local members have been involved, that's useful. I must say this should be a really good partnership where the town council can actually move this on, which is very much where we're coming from. I have no knowledge of any of these sites, but there are possibilities for the town council now to discuss all of these. So at that point, if Duncan really wants this withdrawn so that we change it, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Roger.
I'm glad to hear that, because yes, it does.
I'll answer the question if I'm given a chance.
Yeah, in a minute, Roger.
Yeah. I wanted to go forward, and can I say in a conciliatory manner that if anybody in Oswestry wants it to be amended, it will have to come back to cabinet again. There will be delays, but these sites are there as a starter for 10, and I hope that one of them can be suitable, because we do want to work, and I'm conscious of the health and safety and the young people who want something there. So I would propose this, and please, if Oswestry wants to do anything else, let them come forward, because we can add to it, because I don't know why other sites weren't there. Nobody has spoken to me, but please come back.
Right, Doug.
Yeah, firstly, I emailed Heather because her name is identified as a lead member on the actual agenda papers. It is.
I know, but it isn't mine.
It is.
Yeah, I know, but it isn't mine. It might be on the agenda papers, but it's not right. It's Roger.
Okay, well, I hope you would forward it to Roger. Anyway, I tried to raise it at the earliest opportunity, is all I'm trying to say. I think, as I can only reiterate to you, there will be huge public concern that you're identifying the COPs as a potential location. But that's a matter for Shropshire Council. I'm doing the Town Council. That's a Shropshire Council putting it out as a potential location. And I think it will need to have a good explanation as to why it thinks that the very land that's been damaged is the best place to attract this facility to. The other issues only Shropshire Council can answer. I understand. I spoke to the town clerk. He had a conversation with one officer. He's received nothing in writing about these sites. So I'm not asking you to do, I'm asking you to clarify on what criteria these sites were selected. And two other sites, which I've mentioned, Wilfred Owen Green and Bryn Hafford Field, have not been suggested. Maybe you want to add them to the list. I do not know. But I think the criteria needs to be clear if we're going to go to public consultation.
Right. Let me just add to the recommendations then. If we look at the recommendations as they stand, I would like to add to that we delegate further conversations to the lead member and to the officer concerned, so that we can move this on. I do not want to have this come back to Cabinet again and delay it further. So if we add a delegation so that that can be sorted out, then we can move it on.
To the officer consultation.
So with the lead member, with the Cabinet member. Are we all happy with that? Thank you. In which case, will you propose? Thank you.
I'll propose with the added recommendation with pleasure, Chairman, because yes, it is needed, and we do need to work for the benefit of the residents and those who want to visit it in the future.
Thank you. And my in-house seconder has seconded. So all those in favour? Thank you. Right, thank you. And I do hope that at some point we can celebrate this actually going ahead. Thank you. We now move on to the update on the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme, which is not the other one. and this is should be David Basmer, but we have Tom Dainty with us, who is the Deputy Portfolio Holder. Rob.
I think I'm proposing this officially as a Cabinet member, but Tom is definitely here to answer more questions because he's more intimately involved. So, but it does impact towards economic growth. So, just to introduce it, floods and droughts are no longer distant problems. They're happening here and they're hitting harder and faster. Across the Marches, 2.5% of land is already at the highest flood risk, hitting 38,000 people, 22,000 homes, and 2,800 businesses in harm's way. If we do nothing, damages could top £1 billion, with further losses of nearly £500 million to our local economy. Every major flood could wipe £36 million in economic value and 440 jobs. Doing nothing is not an option. This scheme is about protecting what matters most: our homes, our jobs, and our communities. By managing water smarter, we can keep businesses thriving, safeguard families, and give investors confidence that Shropshire is a safe and resilient place to grow. What makes this scheme different is forward thinking, turning flood prone land into assets for water storage, biodiversity and carbon capture. It's innovative, creating the UK's first geography-based environmental market, redefining how land is valued. And it's collaborative, bringing together councils, farmers, communities under the Marches Forward Partnership to deliver real change. The benefits go beyond flood protection. It's about building rural resilience as a growth opportunity. Demonstrator projects are already underway, and they're proving sustainable solutions can work and can scale. They're not just local success stories, they're blueprints for a stronger economy. We are, I must add, getting interest from external investors into this programme, and that's a really important thing to note. In short, the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme isn't just about water, it's about keeping people safe, protecting jobs, and securing Shropshire's future. So I hope we can turn this into a real opportunity and lead the way in rural innovation.
Do you want to add anything, Tom?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So obviously flooding is one of the most present challenges that we face in Shropshire today. Every year, homes, businesses and vital infrastructure are put at risk, and the cost, both financial and human, is mounting. At present, the Severn Valley catchment sends 57 Wembley stadiums full of water, or 43 principalities for our friends across the border. The Severn Valley Water Management Scheme is our opportunity to shape a different reality. The scheme is about more than managing water, it's creating safer, greener futures. By working with nature rather than against it, we can reduce our flood risks, restore habitats and improve the water quality for our residents. Turning vulnerable land into multifunctional spaces for water storage, biodiversity and carbon capture means that we're not just protecting communities, we're enhancing the environment for generations to come.
What makes this approach powerful is the partnership. Councils, farmers, landowners and local communities are coming together under the Marches Forward partnership to deliver solutions that work on the ground. We've been working very closely with Powys County Council in order to tackle the problem at a preventative level rather than as a last line of defence. This collaboration ensures that every pound invested delivers multiple benefits for flood resilience, environmental gains and strengthening our rural communities. The scheme demonstrates that leadership and innovation and shows that Shropshire can be at the forefront of sustainable water management and as a demonstration to the rest of the country. The Cabinet paper before you provides an update on the technical work to date alongside seeking an agreement for the Council support for an immediate phase of engagement and consultation, ensuring our communities are at the heart of its work. The intention is not to wait until there is a clear plan, but to share an understanding and build solutions in a collaborative manner. This early consultation phase will focus on returning to communities to show them the ongoing work and getting a feel from them and partners to how our future management approach might impact or benefit them. It will ensure that community views are built into the strategy, which in turn will be subject to further consultation in the coming months.
Thank you. This is a really exciting scheme, and the cross-border work is particularly important around all of this. And living on the border, I can tell you it's really important, as Dave does, really, with the impacts of the Severn and the Burnley and so on in the north. So, do we have any questions? Bernie.
Thank you, Leader. Can I just ask Councillor Wilson and Councillor Dainty to confirm that there will be ongoing discussions with relevant town councils with regard to how these plans impact upon the watercourses and the nature and biodiversity corridors relating to those towns?
The plan is to consult with every single layer that is impacted by this scheme. So whether that be resident or town council, county council, and up to, including the Welsh government, it's a huge piece of work, and it will touch on every aspect of our residents and communities.
And interestingly, I went to Melverley Parish Council last week, and they are aware of this, and they told me about it without me saying anything. So it's already beginning to be out there, because if communities are suffering from flooding, they're gradually being informed and included in much of this. So, Tom, you were going to come back? No, Bernie, you were going to.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And in light of this, I presume that the council would be receptive to communication from relevant towns, parishes, and communities where there are risks to this strategy that are identified until it comes into place.
Yes, absolutely. We liaise with SALC and Welsh Communities councils as routine, so it's going to be built into that framework.
It's all mapped, isn't it? So
thank you very much.
Absolutely, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. When I think back to when I was on scrutiny after the floods, when I was a Shropshire County Councillor 20 years ago, all of the stuff with this is what was asked for then with the whole catchment plan. But it will be equally important for the planning as we go through the local plan and develop policy that we make sure there's strong policy to back up all of this stuff.
Absolutely, and as it moves on, it will be really important that we communicate all of that. So was that 20 years ago, Dave?
Yeah.
So, so at least we're moving things, and I know that lots of communities are beginning to talk about leaky dams and all sorts of different things. So, but actually, as this moves on, as we have this action plan, so we can see what's happening, it would be really important that we communicate that. And I've talked to Sarah a bit about this, because I think it's a very important piece of work, really across the board. Because although we can do things locally to help communities be resilient and so on, unless we slow the water coming down, we're not going to get anywhere really, because the water's going to keep coming. So, anything else? No, thank you. I have proposed, and my in-house seconder. Thank you, Alex. All those in favour? You can't vote, Tom. Thank you. So unanimous for those who can vote. Right, I now have to move exclusion of the press and public. So to resolve that in accordance with the provision of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 and paragraph 10.4 brackets 3 of the Council's access to information rules, the public and press be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of the following items. And we now need to take people offline apart from Rosemary.